messages, which, children don't lie about that
Right.
kind of abuse. So they made me go in front of a grand jury and talk about very intimate details of sexual abuse. And it was extremely traumatic for me,
Yes.
So off of that, like when it was all over, my abuser only got 4 years in jail
Yeah.
and he was let out and he went on to abuse other children. And so I felt horrible in a lot of ways that I couldn't have stopped that from happening when I had
Right.
absolutely no control of it.
Yeah.
He
That's
didn't
right.
have the
That's
control.
it.
The
That's right.
court did, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, after a
You're
while,
still a
I was,
teenager at that point, right? You're still in your
yeah,
teens.
yeah, absolutely. And I was going into college and I kept saying to myself, not yet, about talking about the trauma, about diving deep into the
Hmm.
trauma that I had.
I'm curious. Why
Not
is that?
yet.
Why did you put it off?
Fear, mostly fear
Okay.
that I wasn't going to be able to exist in the world the way that I thought normal, quote, normal people do.
Right.
And, I'd say not yet. I'm going into college, and then it would go into no.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Well, greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we empower you to live your most audacious life ever. I'm thrilled to have you join us today, and I truly appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here with us. This together we'll explore inspiring stories and strategies to overcome obstacles and embrace life's boldest possibilities. Now, imagine a garden overrun with weeds, each representing a piece of past trauma. Jennifer Ginty's journey from trauma to healing is like the careful cultivation of this garden. By tending to each weed with patience and care, she transforms it into a thriving space of beauty and resilience. She is a guest on today's episode of the Audacious Living Podcast, and she's a dedicated advocate for mental health and healing. As a survivor of childhood trauma, Jennifer has transformed her experiences into a powerful mission to support others on their healing journeys. Her work with My Moody Monster, which is a tactile therapeutic tool or doll, is making a significant impact on the lives of autistic children and those with behavioral challenges. Jennifer's personal journey and her work with My Moody are directly relevant to today's episode as we explore how tools and therapeutic methods can help individuals process and communicate their emotions effectively. So now that we've got you all set, let's dive into our conversation with Jennifer. Enjoy. Greetings, Jennifer. Thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you making the time to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation.
I am as well. I love the opportunity to engage in these types of conversations. I think, the opportunity to, I guess, impact people in really profound ways just through the art of conversation I think is a powerful tool and something I feel blessed to be able to privilege an opportunity to do. And at the same time, I feel kind of sort of fulfilling my own personal mission. And so to that end, I need to thank you for helping me fulfill my mission for being here. So thank you again. We are, here on this podcast, we spend much time talking about, the importance of sort of living that best audacious life. And, we're all on our own pathway, right? So it's really important to understand that what, is good for Sally is different for John, then Tim, then Ricky. It's all very different. The commonality that exists between our individual paths, from time to time there'll be obstacles, there'll be challenges, there'll things that make our lives difficult to be able to progress forward. It's incumbent on us to find a way to push through those things, those challenges. Maybe it's a matter of tossing a boulder to the side, or maybe we've got to go back in the past and dig up old stuff, or it could be whatever it is, because we're all different. In the world of mental health trauma and sort of PTSD is you spend a lot of time and you're an advocate for mental health and people be able to manage your feelings and emotions. And we'll talk about big feelings and all sorts of things in the spaces that you work within, because that's very important on our individual journey. As a starting point, maybe we can do just that and maybe open it up and get you to come in here, Jennifer, and let our listeners know a little bit about you, the work you do, and what's brought you to this point.
Sure. So I am a single mom of two boys. They are older now, they're 20 and 18. And I'm so very proud of them and the men that they've become.
Right.
And I also live with complex PTSD and major depressive disorder from childhood trauma.
Mhm.
So for the first portion of my life, up until I was 14, my family, I had my mother, my father, and my brothers, and my abuser was my father. And when I was 14, one of my brothers went to a trusted adult and let them know what was going on in our family. And he was taken from our home. And a lot of people think that when a abuser is taken from the situation,
Mhm.
from the home, that that's where the trauma ends for children. But it really doesn't. It's
Mhm.
There's other traumas that come with having come out with the abuse that we've had.
Right.
So the next trauma that I ended up having was in the court system because they wanted to charge my abuser for the crimes that he committed against his children. But we weren't treated with a lot of respect. We
Okay.
weren't treated with the understanding that you would expect people to have for children who have been abused.
Right.
We felt very pushed off. Um, I myself hadn't spoken of a lot of the abuse that I had for many months after it came out. My
Mhm.
brothers were able to speak on it, but I was 14. I didn't really have
Right.
the words,
Yeah, the
really,
words. Yeah. Right.
yeah,
Right.
I'm still a child.
Mhm.
So when I spoke about the abuse that I had had, I was looked at as I was just making it up to
Mhm.
have something else to do with the charges, which, you know, children don't lie about that
Right.
kind of abuse. So they made me go in front of a grand jury and talk about very intimate details of sexual abuse. And it was extremely traumatic for me,
Yes.
So off of that, like, when it was all over, my abuser only got 4 years in jail,
Yeah.
and he was let out, and he went on to abuse other children. And so I felt horrible in a lot of ways that I couldn't have stopped that from happening when I had
Right.
absolutely no control of it.
Yep.
He
That's
didn't
right.
have the
That's
control.
it.
The
That's right.
court did, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, after a
You're
while,
still
I
a
was
teenager at that point, right? You're still in your
yeah.
teens.
Yeah, absolutely, and I was going into college, and I kept saying to myself, "Not yet," about talking about the trauma, about diving deep into the
Hmm.
trauma that I
I'm curious. Why
not
is that?
yet.
Why did you put it off?
Fear, mostly, fear
Okay.
that I wasn't going to be able to, exist in the world the way that I thought normal, quote, "normal" people do.
Right.
And, I'd say, "Not yet." I'm going into college, and then it would go into, "Not yet." I'm starting a career.
Right. Right.
And then it finally went into, "Not yet, I'm a mother. How could I possibly take away from my children to give to myself?" I look back at that, and that's really not the way to look at it. But, mixed with the fear, I just was so afraid that I was going to become a mess, that I
Right.
wasn't gonna be able to function the way that my children needed me to function. And so I just kept saying, "Not yet." And, finally, my brain said to me years later, right now, you have to deal with this. And everything stopped.
What was the
My,
trick? What was the trigger, Jennifer? I'm curious. I mean, after you think all
yeah,
these years, right, and you've been putting off, you've been able to successfully put it off, and then one day you're like, okay, now's the time. Was there a trigger, or what was going on?
yes, there was a trigger. So I owned a women's clothing boutique in my town.
Okay.
And with all the things that were going on around me, I wasn't able to keep it open. And I had to close it and I went into bankruptcy. And that really took a key part of myself, an image of myself that I had to let go of, and I wasn't ready to. And that in itself, going into bankruptcy, changing a major part of your life was that moment. It was the
Right.
moment that my brain said, right now, you've done
Gotcha.
enough. You've gotten through this. You've been through so much. Now is the time to go on that healing journey.
And you were able to make that connection, so you knew what it was, or I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it was that my brain wasn't working right.
I see.
It was slow, it was foggy. I wasn't handling relationships well. I had extremely low self-esteem at that point because
Mhm.
I kept thinking, why couldn't I have kept this going? Why couldn't I have
Right.
done be a, successful adult, right? So my brain really just went into this fogginess, and as I said, I wasn't handling relationships well, and my self-esteem was so low, and my brain was just like, this is it. You
Right.
have to do this now because you're not going to be able to move forward and have a, a lovely life,
Right.
right?
Did you
So,
know what the right now looked like in terms of the action that you take? Did you have any idea what that would look like?
yes, so it was
Yeah.
that I had to really get back into therapy. I needed to find a therapist that worked for me and, as a part of a well-oiled machine together.
Hmm.
And I say that finding a therapist because I want people to understand that going to one therapist and not feeling as though therapy works is, that's not a healthy attitude. If
Right.
you don't click with a therapist, there are so many other therapists out there that you can work with, and you'll find the one that works right with you. So I did that. I got a great recommendation from a social worker that I
Okay.
knew,
Hmm.
and she's younger than me. And yeah, I'm 50 years old now. I just turned 50. So I was
Congratulations.
thank you. I was just like, well, I don't know if a youngin can help me out, right? She's too young to understand me. She's
Right.
not Gen X.
Right. 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 Right.
But the thing that happened was I realized that a younger therapist learns the latest therapies, the latest modalities
Sure.
in
Makes sense.
mental health. And she was able to introduce me to a lot of different therapies that have helped me. And I also realized I had to spend time inpatient at a mental health facility for a little while to
Hmm.
get myself back in the groove of things.
Right.
And it
Right.
really helped, working with medication, figuring out what was the right cocktail for me.
Hmm.
And inside of that, I also learned other great therapies that work specifically for people who have PTSD.
Yep.
And so I was able to open up a new world for myself and step into it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, kudos to you for being able, well, first off, being open to new modalities and new ways of doing things, or even just working with a younger therapist. I mean, oftentimes, we put up these blocks of these things that, she's too young, so I can't work with her, so don't even bother, that kind of a thing, as opposed to maybe breaking down those belief systems that aren't real, or they're based on anything substantial or factual, and being open to that. So kudos to doing that, because that sounds like that really sort of opened the door for a wave of other things.
It did. It absolutely did. It was a great path into that journey.
Good. It was interesting because at the top, when you introduced yourself, you said that you live with PTSD. Um, does that mean it never leaves you, or do you get through it, or does it stay with you? What does that look like?
Well,
Curious.
PTSD, there's PTSD and then there's complex PTSD.
Hmm.
And I can give you a great way of looking at it. A social worker had given me the way to truly understand the difference between the two.
Okay.
So PTSD is, imagine that you're in a terrible car accident and maybe you were behind the wheel and somebody got hurt, you got hurt, something really bad happened, and then you were afraid to get back into a car. It triggered you with so many, the sweatiness, the fear, the shaking. You couldn't do that. And what you needed to do was for someone to help you to get back into that car. And it could be slowly. You get back into the car, and then eventually you drive behind the wheel. And eventually you're driving as if, you didn't have any memories of this terrible accident that's sitting in your body. So you're able to move past that and work through that. So complex PTSD is something that's different. It's when you are pretty much like steeped in trauma, when you've lived a long time in traumatic circumstances. And that could be childhood abuse. That's also veterans that have been in wars and people who are in poverty and homelessness. These
Yep.
are these are situations where you're sitting daily in trauma, in traumatic events. So that is the difference is that with complex PTSD, your body chemistry changes, your
Hmm.
brain waves change, the neurons have changed to keep you safe. So a lot of people who have complex PTSD have hypervigilance, where their body's constantly ready for something to happen. And that is something that I live with on a regular basis. So complex PTSD lives inside of you. It has changed you, and
Gotcha.
that is how you live. And even with PTSD, it's never going to leave you. You're going to have that always there. It's just learning the best ways that help you to cope.
Gotcha.
And yeah, and the ways that, there are therapies that can help change the neurons in your brain to switch them back to a less vigilant, less anxious way of life.
When I hear stories such as yours, and the people coming to terms with what was happening in their past, or what was going on with them, or what made their life in balance, and when they take that step forward to do something about it, the part that really really excites me is what comes out of that, and the different ways, and the creative ways, and the wonderful ways that they move forward. You got monsters, and your monsters became kind of part of your future. Talk about
Yes.
that.
Yes. So this was at the beginning of COVID. In
Hmm.
January 2020, I was having a lot of trouble with my symptoms, and I was in a therapeutic group. And one day I said, I wish I had a monster that I could just rip apart and throw across the room, bang against the wall, and just get all of this out. And people in the group were like, yeah, you should have that. And I was like, okay, I guess I should. So I went home, and I'm not a seamstress, I'm not a tailor in any way, but I created this like ragtag monster plush doll.
Okay.
And I made the arms and the legs and the head with Velcro so I could rip them apart. And I called them PTSD Pete to start because it was my own little doll that I had for myself. And
Yes.
after a while using it, I realized that this could probably help a lot of other people,
Yep.
especially children,
Mm,
because children don't have a hold of their emotions. They're
that's
just
right.
learning about them. And it's really important for families to be able to communicate with each other in a safe way, a safe space. So I went to this entrepreneur center and got
Hmm.
into the accelerator program that they had for the summer. And so this was COVID, so everything was closed down. And it took the entire summer up, and that was fantastic for me. I was able to build on Pete and turn them into Moody. So I created my Moody monster, and it really took off. I was able to give these
Beautiful.
dolls to yeah to give these dolls to families and see how the children had worked with them and they loved them. And I decided that this was going to be a core mission for me, to get Moody out to families and teach them that all feelings are valid. It's just how we communicate them and how we
Mm,
we cope with them that matters.
that's lovely. What feedback are you getting from families?
Oh, a lot of families love Moody for the ability for them to know that a child is revving up into having a frustrating,
Okay.
burst, outburst.
Yep.
And so giving Moody to them, they're able to get that out.
Mhm.
The sound, I spent 4 years working on the Velcro. It had to be the stickiest Velcro I
Oh,
could
of course. Yeah. Yeah.
possibly get, right? So the ripping of the doll's arms and legs and head and the softness and the way that they were able to, you know, beat on it and use all of that pent up energy to take it out on Moody. And we always tell the kids, Moody doesn't mind. That's what they're there for. It doesn't hurt them. So they have been able to understand where their child is at when they're using Moody. The best part about Moody, though, is putting them back together, because when you start to put Moody back together, you can talk about what happened. What can we do next time to help you
Creates an
through that
opportunity. Yeah.
frustration?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a communication that has really been eye opening for families. Because I don't know about you, but back in my day, kids were not allowed to show their feelings. Like, don't be an
Mhm.
angry girl.
Right.
Don't make your grandma uncomfortable with your sadness, that kind
Right.
of thing. So Moody's there to let them know that all those emotions are okay. You're allowed to feel those, and we can figure out how better to cope with them.
So first off, wonderful. It's a beautiful image, and I love the opportunity for dialogue and discussion afterwards as you're putting them back together. Um, Out of curiosity, I'm wondering, were there any sort of unforeseen benefits that have come out of it? Like, so I know sometimes you go in with, oh, this is what I wanted to do, it's gonna do this and do this, and something else happens that is equally as wonderful as your ideas that you never saw coming. Was there anything like that for you?
Yeah, there were a couple. I realized when I gave these dolls to families that therapists and teachers can use them as well. So I gave one to my therapist, and she loves her Moody, and a couple of other therapists, and they realized that Moody was really good for helping parents to communicate what they need to communicate with the kids
Mm,
beforehand, using Moody as the stand-in for their kid.
mm,
So therapists were able to allow the parent to get out what they needed to and maybe help them to better communicate when they do talk with their children. And then
mm.
teachers are having a great time with them in their classroom. They have them in like a safe space, and a child can, when they're feeling like they can't hold on to their body, they need to get something out. A lot of kids with ADHD, they can go over to the Moody corner and
Mm.
play along with Moody. And when they're done, they're able to come back to the classroom and continue to work with the other kids.
Wow. It sounds like a really powerful coping tool, because it's not we're not saying this something to make it go away. That's not what we're talking about. It's
Mhm.
finding ways to cope with what you have or the experiences that you're going through for that moment. Is that fair to say?
Yes, very fair to say. Yeah, that's what I really wanted out of this is the whole package is allowing people to feel their own feelings and understand that they're allowed to feel those feelings, and learning those skills to cope, building a toolbox of
Hmm.
coping skills is what really helps a child to become an emotionally intelligent adult.
So important, so important. The recognition of where children are now aren't where they're going to stay. Obviously, they are going to grow and evolve and develop. And really, what it comes down to is, as they grow and develop and evolve, what emotions, what experiences they're going to carry with them, right, as they move through life. And if you start off at a not so great place, and that's where your starting point is. How are we able to help them distinguish between the things that should stay in their childhood or things that they need to carry with them, right?
Well, I think that coping skills that adults use
Yep.
can be taught to children in ways that allow them to kind of memorize it again in their bodies so that when things happen, they automatically pull out that toolbox and pull out
Mm,
that skill that is necessary for it. And I think it's really important that parents put on, the oxygen mask themselves
very true.
and
Yeah.
go through their own ideas of what emotions are and what they can be and should
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
When I was waiting for my prototype for Moody for the past like 4 years, I realized I had to do something while I was waiting. I couldn't just let this sit and then build it all back up again.
Right.
So I started this YouTube channel and I started Moody Talks. And what
Okay.
I did is I choose a motion each month. And I would talk the first week, I would talk about what words do you use in this emotion? Let's write them down and
Yep.
let's figure out what the intensity is of these emotions in the words. Because if you put the words on a scale, an intensity scale, you're figuring out what are the most intense words that you use. And when those pop in your brain, that's how intense you're feeling that emotion.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
then
Yes.
also like body sensations, stuff like that, that you feel when you have this particular emotion. And
Yeah.
then the next 3 weeks, I pick coping skills that I learned through DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy.
Mhm.
And I would teach them each week a new skill for people to maybe find that they also have a great, they have a great feeling about that skill and can develop it and put that in their toolbox.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really appreciate the point that you made around the skills, the coping skills that the adults are taught that can be taught to children as well. Um, and it's interesting because you're seeing that. I mean, you think. I mean, you think of the movie Inside Out as an example. You know, it's being able to label emotions, name them, identify when they're happening, how you're feeling, what's driving those feelings. Like those are now things that we are teaching children. They're starting to recognize that and label them for themselves, which is so phenomenal. Um, Funny I mentioned Inside Out. I haven't seen part two yet, by the way. I don't know if you've seen it. I haven't seen part two
I
yet, but
haven't. My kids are
uh,
grown up. They don't want to go with me.
well, that's kind of what I'm faced with too. I don't have young kids any longer. Say, hey, let's go to the movies. Meanwhile, it was for me, right? Like
Right.
I saw all the Toy Stories the first week they were released, right? Because hey, I'm
Yes.
thinking my kids, right? But no, and all, joking aside, I think they provide a wonderful avenue for us to teach our children and help them understand and to be able to articulate that. Um, in my view, I think when we talk about coping mechanisms and strategies, I think sometimes there's misconceptions about what they really are, really what they're really meant to be, and it's really just for that moment. It's not making anything go away. It's just for that moment. So they have to recognize that as well too. And I think when you can get those dialogues and discussions and understandings, it's just a healthy place to be, right?
Yes.
Oh,
Absolutely, it is.
wonderful. Oh, wonderful. I'm curious, were there any kind of success stories that you come across? Well, those who've experienced Moody and what it's done for their lives. Have any to share?
Yes. So autistic children are having a great time with Moody, and their
Mm,
parents have found them very helpful because, especially for autistic children who are nonverbal,
mm,
because they can help their children understand Moody's going to help you show us when you're upset,
mhm.
when you're frustrated. So when you work with Moody, we understand. You don't have to tell that to us verbally. We
Gotcha.
understand that this is where you're at right now and that we need to move into help mode for you. And the autistic children also love the way they feel. They love the tactile experience. They
Sure.
like the sound of the ripping.
Yes.
So autistic children have really had, a good time with Moody, and they've really helped their families out. And also, I have given a few to first responders because
Okay.
one of my social mission for Moody is to take a group of them that I've from each order and give them to first responders and social workers and treatment centers for children because these children are in trauma
Yes.
and
Yes.
they need somebody, something to hold on to help them through it. So that is what I'm hoping that I can continue to do with each order. And, children who are in house fires and they're outside and they've lost everything, or, children who are going to foster care, they're given a trash bag to throw their things in, and then they have to leave their home. So to give them a buddy to help them through that traumatic time. And again, also kids who are in like cancer treatments,
Yep.
who they
Yep.
also need a buddy to hold on to during those
Yes.
times when they're in pain. So those are the people that I truly want to reach out to and make sure
Mm.
that they have what they need.
And thanks for sharing. I mean, one of my questions was to be around, how do you envision, my Moody monster impacting those in the future? And you jumped ahead there, which is awesome. And I think also too what it's doing, it really, really is having a positive impact on mental health and mental health awareness. To know that it's giving permission not to be okay in that moment. And there are times those going through mental health challenges or in crisis or whatever are feeling a sense of guilt in that moment because of the way they feel, although they have no control of that because of what they're experiencing. And so to be able to say, hey, look, it's okay to feel the way you do. In fact, take this and it'll help you process how you're feeling in that moment. And if your emotions say rip and pull and grab and stomp, and there you go, it's yours, right? And I think that's really empowering, really.
Yeah, I wish that I had had a Moody when my sons were younger. My oldest had a lot of trouble with behavioral
Yeah.
issues, and we called him the Tasmanian devil, because
Mm,
when he would get so upset, he would he'd go ballistic. He'd go all over the place. He'd kick, he'd throw things. I have to hide his son and my other son at times too, because he was just so out of control. But the worst part about it was afterwards, he had a shame spiral. And after seeing what he had done, he was so ashamed of himself and what he
mm,
did. And when kids go into shame spirals too often, they get toxic shame and they start to believe that they're bad themselves.
right, right,
When, shame is knowing that, the situation that you were in and what you did in that situation was not acceptable. But toxic shame is believing you're a bad person. And that's just not the way we want our children to grow, right?
right, right, right. No, very, very true. Very, very true. Um, do you got one that we can see what it looks like there? I'm
Oh,
curious.
yeah.
Yeah, let's
Oh,
let's
yeah. This is Moody.
let's go. Let's see. Whoa, okay, all right. That's a monster for
So
sure.
that is, you can rip the head off,
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah,
do what
yeah.
you need to do. Yep, the
Yeah.
arms and legs, they come off.
I get the sense that the head's always the first one to go. Yeah, is it the head? Yeah, is that fair to
Oh,
say, or the
yeah.
arms? Yeah.
Always. No, the head always, always. Because it's just so big and you can just squish your hand
Yeah.
right into it, right?
Gotcha. Gotcha. It looks very plush too.
It is. Yeah. So they're
Wow.
very soft. They have a lot of different tactile feels to them. And
Yes.
then, yeah,
So
that
important.
ripping sound. That's the thing that the kids love the most is the ripping sound.
Wow. Wow. Um, outside of telling parents and caregivers to go get a My Moody Monster, is there any other advice or suggestions or feedback that you can give them when it comes to sort of coping strategies with their children?
Yes. Like I said before, put the oxygen mask on before
Yeah.
anybody else. It's important for you to understand your own emotions in the situation because our kids, they tick us off. They can be really annoying, right? I'm a parent and I know other parents can think of their children in the most annoying
Sure.
ways,
Sure.
right? So when you're in that situation with a child and they're going out of control, stepping back and saying, what can I do to not put the flame to the fire? And get your own self in control, maybe use a coping skill that you've learned when you need to move back into mom or dad mode or caregiver mode, and then you're going to be able to deal with that and maybe de-escalate that situation a little
Yep.
quicker, even though you think, oh god, I can't spend the time to look at myself, give myself my coping skill. It really does de-escalate the child when you're able to bring your levels down and go to them with an open heart.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I love it. I love it. And again, the work that you're doing to support children's well-being, their mental well-being is so important, one, and very powerful. And again, I said earlier, I love to hear people's journeys, because what comes out on the other side is just so beautiful. Or sometimes they're ugly like Moody, but whatever. I mean, they come out and they're this thing now that has the ability to have profound impacts. And you've done exactly that. Congratulations, Jennifer, on your own personal journey and what's brought you to this point. For our listeners that wanted to get their own Moody or connect with you directly, where can we send them?
So you can go to my website, mymoodymonster.com, all one word. And I just got funding to buy a much bigger order of Moody's, because I sold out of my first batch.
Wonderful.
So I got the funding. I'm going to be able to order new dolls, and they're going to be available in the next few months. So you can go on to mymoodymonster.com, and you can also go to the Moody Talks on my YouTube station, which is My Moody Monster.
Amazing. Congratulations, Jennifer, on just a wonderful, wonderful mission. And the creation of My Moody Monsters is not something I was just done just because. There's so much purpose, and you can see it loud and clear, but then you also can see the benefit impacts, the positive impacts it's having on others. And so congratulations. And thank you for being here on the Audacious Living Podcast. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
And back we are here on the podcast, on a chat with Jennifer. We learned that healing from trauma is a deeply personal journey that requires courage and the right support. Jennifer's experience shows us that it's never too late to start healing. By seeking therapy and finding the right support, she was able to rebuild her life and help others do the same in the process. Her story reminds us that healing is possible, no matter how daunting it may seem. And I encourage you to connect with Jennifer directly if you've got more questions and want to learn more about My Moody Monster. Her contact details are in the show notes below, and she's certainly eager to share her insights and support you on your own similar journey. She's actually got a special discount on Moody for our listeners. Again, the show notes are there. You can check it out to access this special offer. I want to thank you for joining us on the Audacious Living Podcast. If you found this episode inspiring, please like, follow, subscribe, and share with your friends if you haven't already done so. Your support helps us to continue to grow and bring more empowering stories to you. Until next time, keep living audaciously. Stay kind. Until next time, I booted that line, but until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.